While exploring a remote forest, twin hikers Marcus and Elena Rodriguez thought they were alone until a German shepherd appeared on the trail. The trained canine, wearing a faded search and rescue vest, seemed desperate to find something in the wilderness. Without warning, the dog bolted deeper into the woods, his urgent barking echoing through the trees. The twins followed, their curiosity overcoming caution, as the animal led them off marked trails into dense undergrowth. What they found would change their lives forever. Hidden beneath decades of moss and fallen leaves, a concrete entrance, sealed with rusted metal doors, lay buried in the forest floor. When they pried open the tunnel, the stench that escaped made them gag. Inside the chamber, evidence of crimes long buried waited in the darkness. But what they discovered wasn't just remnants of the past. Something was still alive down there. What had this dog been trained to find? And why had it taken 40 years to surface? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his hiking pack and checked his GPS for the third time that morning. At 28, he approached every outdoor adventure with the methodical precision that made him an exceptional geology graduate student. His twin sister, Elena, shared his passion for the wilderness, though her interests leaned toward forensic geology and the stories that soil and rock formations could tell about human activity. They had planned this 3-day trek through the remote Olympic National Park as a celebration. Marcus had just defended his thesis on volcanic soil composition, while Elena was completing her graduate work on using geological evidence in criminal investigations. The isolated trails of the Pacific Northwest offered the perfect escape from months of academic pressure. The morning had started like any other wilderness adventure. They'd left their campsite at dawn, following the barely marked Whisper Creek Trail that wound through old-growth forest, where Douglas firs towered like ancient sentinels. The air carried the crisp scent of pine needles and morning dew, and their boots crunched softly on the carpet of fallen leaves that had accumulated over countless seasons. Elena paused to examine a peculiar rock formation, her trained eye catching geological details that most hikers would overlook. "Look at this stratification pattern," she said, running her fingers along the exposed stone. "This sediment displacement suggests significant human activity in this area, but that doesn't make sense. We're 15 miles from any established settlements." Marcus joined her examination, his expertise complementing hers. "The soil composition here is different too. See how it's been disturbed and recompacted? Someone moved a lot of earth around this spot, probably decades ago, based on the vegetation growth patterns. That's when the German shepherd appeared. The dog emerged from the underbrush without warning, his thick coat matted with pine needles, and his eyes holding an intelligence that immediately captured their attention. The faded orange search and rescue vest he wore had seen better days, its reflective strips dulled by weather and time. A small metal tag dangled from his collar, but from their distance, they couldn't make out the details. The animal didn't approach them directly. Instead, he circled their position, occasionally stopping to sniff the air or paw at the ground. His behavior suggested training, purpose, and urgency that spoke of a specific mission rather than random wandering. "That's not normal dog behavior," Elena observed, her forensic training kicking in. "He's searching for something specific. See how he's working a grid pattern? That's professional search technique." The dog suddenly froze, his ears perked and nose pointed toward a dense thicket of undergrowth about 50 yards off the main trail. A low whine escaped his throat, followed by sharp, insistent barking that echoed through the forest. Without hesitation, he bolted toward the thicket, occasionally looking back as if expecting them to follow. Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. Their wilderness experience had taught them to trust animal instincts, especially when those animals showed clear signs of training. Against their better judgment regarding staying on marked trails, they decided to follow. The German shepherd led them through increasingly dense forest, navigating fallen logs and steep terrain with sure-footed determination. His path seemed random to the twins, but his confidence suggested familiarity with the route. After 20 minutes of challenging hiking, he stopped at what appeared to be a natural depression in the forest floor. Elena knelt beside the dog, who was now pawing frantically at what looked like ordinary forest debris. But her trained eye caught something others might miss. "Marcus, this isn't natural. Look at the edges of this depression. Someone excavated here and tried to make it look natural again." Together, they began clearing away layers of moss, fallen branches, and accumulated leaves. What they uncovered made them step back in surprise. Beneath the organic camouflage lay concrete edges and what appeared to be metal doors, green with age and corrosion. The German shepherd's excitement increased as they exposed more of the structure. He scratched at the metal surface and whined, clearly wanting them to open whatever lay beneath. The twins found rusted handles and, after considerable effort, managed to pry one of the heavy doors partially open. The smell that escaped was overwhelming. Decades of stagnant air mixed with something far more disturbing, something that spoke of human presence and activities that had no business being buried in a remote forest. Elena covered her nose with her sleeve and peered into the darkness beyond the entrance. "There's definitely a chamber down there," she reported, her voice muffled. "In Marcus, I found something." She held up a tarnished metal identification tag that had been wedged between the door and its frame. The name etched into the metal was still legible: Jennifer Walsh, missing since August 1984. Marcus retrieved a small LED flashlight from his pack and shined it into the opening. The beam revealed rough concrete walls, descending into what appeared to be a man-made chamber. The German shepherd pushed past them, disappearing into the darkness with the confidence of familiarity. "We should call the authorities," Elena said, though her voice carried the uncertainty of someone whose scientific curiosity was warring with common sense. "With what signal?" Marcus replied, holding up his phone to show 0 bars. "We're in the middle of nowhere, and this could be important evidence. If we leave now, who knows what might happen to this site?" Elena nodded reluctantly. Her forensic training told her they should document everything before potentially contaminating a crime scene, but they also couldn't simply walk away from what they'd discovered. She pulled out her digital camera and began photographing the entrance and surrounding area. The descent into the chamber required careful navigation down what appeared to be hand-carved steps. The walls showed tool marks and a level of craftsmanship that suggested significant time and planning had gone into this construction. The air grew thicker as they descended, carrying scents that spoke of decades of human habitation. At the bottom, Marcus's flashlight beam swept across a space that defied their expectations. The underground chamber stretched approximately 20 feet in each direction, with a ceiling high enough for an adult to stand comfortably. But it was the contents that made them both freeze in horror. Against one wall, metal rings had been bolted into the concrete at various heights. Rusted chains hung from several of them, their length suggesting they had been used for restraint. A mattress, stained and rotting, lay in one corner beside a bucket that had clearly served purposes they didn't want to contemplate. The German shepherd moved through the space with purpose, occasionally stopping to sniff specific areas before moving on. His behavior suggested this wasn't his first visit to this horrible place. Elena forced herself to maintain professional composure as she documented the scene. Her camera flash illuminated details that would haunt her dreams for years to come. Scratches in the concrete walls formed desperate messages. Names carved with fingernails or improvised tools. Dates spanning decades. One message carved deeper than the others. Read, "Sarah Winters, if found, tell my family I fought." Marcus discovered a collection of personal items that had been carefully arranged on a makeshift shelf carved into the wall. Watches, jewelry, driver's licenses, and other identification documents created a shrine to the victims who had been brought to this underground prison. Each item represented a life interrupted, a family left wondering, a story that ended in this concrete tomb. Among these items, Elena found a small stack of Polaroid photographs bound with a rubber band. Her hands trembled as she examined them, the images revealing the systematic nature of what had occurred in this chamber. The photos showed different people in various stages of captivity, and worse, they showed their captor, a man whose face appeared in multiple images, spanning what appeared to be decades. "This isn't just a crime scene," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible in the enclosed space. "This is a trophy collection. Someone has been using this place for a very long time." The German Shepherd had positioned himself near what appeared to be a second passage leading deeper into the underground complex. His low growling suggested he sensed something the twins couldn't detect. Marcus approached cautiously, his flashlight revealing a narrow tunnel that extended beyond the reach of his beam. As they explored further, they discovered evidence of recent activity: fresh water bottles, recently discarded food packaging, and a sleeping bag that still carried the scent of human occupation. Someone had been using this chamber within the past few days, possibly even hours. Elena's forensic training helped her piece together the timeline. The older evidence, the chains, the carved messages, the vintage photographs, dated back decades. But the newer items suggested this site remained active. The implications sent chills through both twins. The German Shepherd's behavior became increasingly agitated as they examined the evidence of recent habitation. He paced near the entrance, occasionally barking softly as if trying to warn them of approaching danger. His trained instincts recognized threats that the twins, focused on their discovery, were only beginning to understand. Marcus was photographing the message wall when Elena discovered the most disturbing artifact yet. Hidden beneath the rotting mattress was a hand-drawn map showing not just this location, but several others scattered across the Pacific Northwest. Each site was marked with symbols indicating buried chambers, safe houses, and what appeared to be body disposal sites. The map revealed the true scope of what they had stumbled upon. This wasn't an isolated crime scene, but part of a network that spanned multiple states and represented decades of systematic criminal activity. The careful documentation suggested organization and planning that went far beyond a single perpetrator. The German Shepherd's agitation reached a crescendo as he positioned himself between the twins and the chamber entrance, his hackles raised and a low growl rumbling in his chest. Marcus and Elena had been so absorbed in documenting their horrific discovery that they'd missed the subtle signs their four-legged guide had been trying to communicate. Elena was carefully photographing the hand-drawn map when she noticed the dog's defensive posture. "Marcus," she whispered urgently, "something's wrong." That's when they heard it, the distant sound of footsteps on the forest floor above, accompanied by voices speaking in hushed tones. The German Shepherd's training kicked in as he moved to the chamber entrance and listened intently, his ears swiveling to track multiple sources of sound. Marcus quickly switched off his flashlight, plunging them into complete darkness. They stood frozen, straining to hear what was happening above their underground hiding place. The voices grew closer, and they could make out at least 3 different speakers, though the words remained indistinct through the concrete barrier. "We need to get out of here," Elena breathed into Marcus's ear, but the German Shepherd blocked their path to the entrance, clearly indicating that escape in that direction was no longer an option. While examining the map more closely by the light of Elena's camera display, they discovered that the tunnel system was more extensive than they'd initially realized. The hand-drawn diagram showed multiple passages connecting to the main chamber, including what appeared to be an emergency exit marked with careful notations about distance and direction. The voices above had stopped, which somehow felt more ominous than when they could track the speaker's movements. Elena's forensic training told her that silence often preceded action, and in their current situation, that action was unlikely to be in their favor. Marcus found the entrance to the secondary tunnel that matched the map's description. It was narrow and required crawling, but it offered their only alternative to waiting in the chamber for whatever was coming. The German Shepherd seemed to approve of this route. moving ahead of them with the confidence of an animal that knew the way. As they prepared to enter the escape tunnel, Elena made a crucial discovery among the personal effects on the makeshift shelf. Hidden beneath a collection of driver's licenses was a piece of modern electronic equipment that looked completely out of place among the decades-old artifacts. The device was a small, sophisticated radio transmitter with digital display and multiple frequency settings. Its technology was clearly contemporary, suggesting someone had been using it recently to coordinate activities at the site. The implications were terrifying. This wasn't just a historical crime scene, but an active operational base for ongoing criminal activity. Marcus examined the device more closely and realized it was set to a specific frequency with scheduled transmission times noted on a small piece of paper taped to its side. According to the schedule, the next transmission was due in less than an hour. Someone was monitoring this location and expecting regular check-ins from whoever had been using the chamber. The sound of metal scraping against concrete echoed from the main entrances. Someone began forcing open the heavy doors they had struggled to move earlier. The German shepherd's growling intensified, and he began pushing the twins toward the escape tunnel with increasing urgency. Elena grabbed the radio equipment and the hand-drawn map before following Marcus into the narrow passage. The German shepherd brought up the rear, his protective instincts overriding any concern for his own safety. The tunnel was barely wide enough for a person to crawl through, and the complete darkness made navigation a matter of following the dog's guidance and trusting the map's accuracy. Behind them, they could hear voices in the main chamber, speaking in clipped, professional tones that suggested military or law enforcement background. But these weren't rescue workers. The conversation centered on cleaning the site and eliminating evidence, phrases that made the twins crawl faster through the suffocating darkness. The escape tunnel seemed to stretch forever, though Elena's estimation suggested they had traveled perhaps 200 yards underground. The German shepherd occasionally paused to sniff the air, checking for threats ahead, while ensuring his human companions kept moving. Finally, they reached what appeared to be another chamber, this one smaller and containing different equipment. Elena's camera flash revealed surveillance monitors, communication equipment, and detailed maps of the surrounding forest, marked with observation posts and patrol routes. This was clearly a command center for monitoring the main chamber and controlling access to the area. Most disturbing of all, the surveillance monitors showed live feeds from cameras positioned throughout the forest. On one screen, they could see armed figures moving through the woods in coordinated search patterns, clearly looking for something or someone. The twins realized with growing horror that their discovery had triggered a manhunt, and they were the prey. The surveillance monitors painted a chilling picture of their situation. Armed figures moved through the forest with military precision, their search patterns suggesting professional training and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Elena counted at least 6 individuals on the various camera feeds, all carrying weapons and communication equipment. Marcus studied the maps posted around the command center, trying to identify alternative escape routes that might not be monitored. The level of detail was staggering. Every trail, creek, and natural landmark had been catalogued and marked with specific codes. Red zones indicated areas under constant surveillance, while yellow zones showed patrol routes that rotated on scheduled intervals. The German shepherd positioned himself near what appeared to be another exit from the command center, his behavior indicating familiarity with this underground network. Elena noticed that his search and rescue vest had additional pockets containing equipment she hadn't seen before. A small GPS unit, emergency rations, and what looked like medical supplies. This dog isn't just trained for search and rescue, she realized aloud. He's equipped for extended operations in hostile territory. Their examination of the command center revealed the true sophistication of the operation they had stumbled into. Communication logs showed regular contact with multiple sites across the Pacific Northwest. Coordinated supply deliveries, and most disturbing of all, scheduled transfers of what were cryptically referred to as packages between various locations. Marcus discovered a filing cabinet containing detailed profiles of missing persons dating back decades. Each file contained photographs, personal information, and handwritten notes documenting the fate of individuals who had disappeared in the region. The systematic nature of the record-keeping suggested an organization that operated with business-like efficiency. Elena found the most damning evidence, yet a sophisticated radio system that had been modified for encrypted communications. The equipment was far beyond anything civilians would typically possess, suggesting connections to military or intelligence operations. A notebook beside the radio contained frequency codes and transmission schedules that indicated coordination with external support networks. The radio crackled to life with an incoming transmission, causing all three of them to freeze. A voice spoke in clipped professional tones. "Base, this is Patrol 7. We have evidence of unauthorized access to the primary site. Request permission to expand search perimeter and activate containment protocols." The response came immediately. "Patrol 7, you are authorized for full containment." "No witnesses." "Repeat, no witnesses." Elena and Marcus exchanged terrified glances as the implications became clear. They weren't just trespassers who had stumbled onto a crime scene. They were now targets for elimination by what appeared to be a highly organized and ruthless operation. The German shepherd seemed to understand the urgency of their situation. He moved to the alternate exit and began pawing at what looked like a camouflaged hatch in the ceiling. Marcus helped him lift the heavy cover, revealing a passage that led upward toward natural light. Before leaving the command center, Elena made a crucial decision. She quickly photographed the filing cabinet contents, radio frequencies, and surveillance maps, knowing this evidence might be their only chance of survival if they could get it to the proper authorities. The question was determining who could be trusted when the operation clearly had professional backing. The escape hatch led to a concealed exit in a natural rock formation about half a mile from the original tunnel entrance. The German shepherd emerged first, scanning the area before signaling that it was safe for the twins to follow. His military-style training was becoming increasingly apparent as he employed tactics that went far beyond typical search and rescue operations. Marcus consulted his GPS and realized they were still deep in the remote forest, at least 10 miles from the nearest road. Their cell phones remained useless, and the surveillance network they had discovered made traditional escape routes extremely dangerous. The German shepherd seemed to have a plan, however, leading them away from established trails toward terrain that appeared more challenging but offered better concealment. Elena's examination of the stolen photographs revealed additional disturbing details about the operation's scope. The filing system included documentation of victims from multiple states, suggesting a network that operated across jurisdictional boundaries. Some files contained references to official case numbers and law enforcement contacts, implying that certain missing persons investigations had been compromised from within. As they followed the German shepherd through increasingly difficult terrain, they heard the distant sound of helicopters approaching from multiple directions. The search had expanded beyond ground teams to include aerial surveillance, dramatically reducing their options for escape. The dog led them to a steep ravine where a small creek provided both concealment and a route that would be difficult to track from the air. Elena realized that their survival now depended entirely on trusting an animal whose training and purpose remained mysterious, but whose determination to protect them had become their only advantage. Against a sophisticated enemy that seemed to have unlimited resources, the German shepherd led them through the ravine for nearly an hour before suddenly stopping and looking upward, toward a rocky outcropping that seemed to offer no obvious shelter. But as they approached, Elena noticed that what appeared to be natural stone formation actually concealed a carefully camouflaged entrance to another cave system. A voice called out from within the hidden entrance. "Calm but authoritative. Atlas, bring them inside, quickly." The German shepherd, apparently named Atlas, immediately responded to the command, guiding Marcus and Elena toward the concealed opening. As they entered, they found themselves face to face with a woman in her mid-60s, whose weathered features and alert eyes spoke of someone who had spent decades living in the wilderness. "I'm Sarah Winters," she said, extending a calloused hand in greeting, "and I've been waiting for someone to find that tunnel for more than 30 years. Eleanor's breath caught. "Sarah Winters. You carved your name in the chamber wall. "Among other things," Sarah replied grimly. "Atlas here has been helping me document their operation for the past 8 years. Every tunnel, every cache, every burial site in a 50-mile radius. Sarah's shelter was far more sophisticated than the crude underground chambers they had discovered. Natural cave formations had been carefully modified to create a comfortable living space with multiple escape routes, food storage, and most importantly, a comprehensive intelligence center focused on tracking the criminal network. The walls were covered with detailed maps, photographs, and timelines documenting decades of disappearances, criminal activity, and cover-ups. Sarah had created what amounted to a private investigation headquarters, complete with evidence files that would make any law enforcement agency envious. "How did you survive?" Marcus asked, still processing the implications of meeting someone they had assumed was long dead. "I escaped during a transfer between facilities in 1987, Sarah explained. "Spent 3 months recovering in these caves before I realized that going to the authorities would likely get me killed. Too many of them are compromised, so I decided to build a case that couldn't be ignored or buried." She showed them a leather-bound journal that contained meticulous records of every crime she had witnessed or investigated over the past 4 decades. Names, dates, locations, and most importantly, detailed descriptions of the perpetrators and their methods. The journal represented a comprehensive case file that connected hundreds of missing persons cases across multiple states. Atlas had been trained specifically to locate evidence sites and burial locations, Sarah explained. His previous handler had been a federal agent who got too close to exposing the network and paid the ultimate price. Sarah had rescued the dog and continued his training, using his abilities to map the full scope of the criminal operation. "The network calls itself the Collective," Sarah continued. "They've been operating since the early 1970s, targeting isolated victims who wouldn't be immediately missed. Hikers, hitchhikers, runaways, people whose disappearances could be explained away or ignored by overwhelmed law enforcement agencies." Elena shared the photographs and documents they had recovered from the command center, and Sarah's expression grew increasingly grim as she reviewed them. "This confirms what I've suspected. They're preparing to relocate their entire operation. Your discovery has accelerated their timeline." The journal contained entries that painted a horrifying picture of systematic abduction, imprisonment, and murder spanning 5 decades. But more disturbing were the connections Sarah had documented between the Collective and various official agencies. Missing persons reports that disappeared from files, evidence that was mysteriously lost or contaminated, witnesses who died in suspicious accidents. "The man in those Polaroid photos is David Kruger," Sarah said, pointing to the images Eleanor had found. "He's been the operational leader since the beginning. Former military, connections throughout law enforcement and intelligence agencies. He's the reason this network has survived for so long." Sarah's intelligence files revealed that the Collective operated multiple facilities throughout the Pacific Northwest, with the underground chamber being just one component of a larger infrastructure. They maintained safe houses, disposal sites, and even legitimate businesses that served as fronts for their activities. "Why haven't you gone public with this evidence?" Marcus asked. "Because they have people everywhere," Sarah replied. "Local police, state investigators, federal agents. The few times I tried to work through official channels, the people I contacted either disappeared or were transferred to other assignments. The network has had decades to place their people in positions of influence. Atlas suddenly became alert, moving to the cave entrance and listening intently. Sarah immediately began gathering essential equipment and documents, her movements suggesting long practice in rapid evacuation procedures. "They've found our trail," she said urgently. "We need to move to the secondary shelter. Atlas will guide us, but we need to leave now." Sarah led them through a complex series of natural passages that connected to her secondary shelter, a more defensible position deeper in the cave system. Along the way, she explained the true scope of what they were facing, her voice carrying the weight of decades spent fighting an invisible enemy. "The collective operates in cells," she said as they navigated narrow passages by flashlight. "Each facility is semi-autonomous, but they're all connected through a command structure that reaches into the highest levels of government. They've had 50 years to perfect their methods." The secondary shelter contained evidence that took Marcus and Elena's breath away. Sarah had collected coded correspondence between various officials and collective operatives. Letters that revealed coordination between corrupt politicians, law enforcement administrators, and business leaders across multiple states. Elena examined the correspondence with her forensic training, noting the careful use of euphemisms and coded language that discussed resource management, waste disposal, and security consultations. To an outsider, they might appear to be legitimate business communications, but the context made their true meaning horrifyingly clear. "This letter is from a state senator," Marcus observed, holding up a document dated just 6 months earlier. "He's discussing budget allocations for special projects in remote areas." "Senator William Morrison," Sarah confirmed. "He's been providing legislative cover for their land acquisitions and ensuring that certain areas remain off-limits to park services and environmental inspectors. His committee controls funding for search and rescue operations in this region." The correspondence revealed a network that extended far beyond simple criminal enterprise. The collective had systematically placed supporters in positions that allowed them to control investigations, manipulate evidence, and eliminate threats to their operation. They owned judges, prosecutors, and police chiefs in small towns throughout the Pacific Northwest. Sarah showed them financial records that documented the economic aspects of their operation. The collective generated revenue through multiple streams: human trafficking, organ harvesting, and serving wealthy clients who paid premium prices for access to victims. The money was laundered through legitimate businesses and charitable foundations that provided perfect cover for their activities. "The foundation that sponsors search and rescue training in this region," Sarah pointed to a document, "Collective Front Organization. They use it to identify and recruit people with the skills they need, then either corrupt them or eliminate them if they become threats." Atlas had positioned himself near the shelter entrance, his training keeping him alert for approaching danger. But Sarah seemed confident in their current location, suggesting they had time to review the most critical evidence before planning their next move. Elena discovered the most damning piece of correspondence, a series of letters between David Kruger and federal officials discussing containment, protocols for witnesses, and asset protection strategies. The letters confirmed that the collective had protection at the federal level, with officials who actively worked to suppress investigations and eliminate threats. This explains why missing persons cases in this region have such low resolution rates, Elena realized. They're not just failing to solve them, they're actively preventing solutions. Marcus found technical specifications for the surveillance and communication equipment they had encountered, revealing that the collective used military-grade technology supplied through official channels. The requisitions were disguised as legitimate security purchases for various government agencies, then diverted to support criminal operations. The correspondence also revealed the scope of their victim selection process. The collective maintained detailed databases of potential targets, identifying individuals whose disappearances would generate minimal investigation. They studied social media, employment records, and family situations to find the most vulnerable targets. "They've been watching you since you registered for your hiking permits," Sarah said, showing them a recent communication that mentioned geology students and potential containment issues. "Your academic backgrounds made you particularly dangerous to them." Sarah's intelligence files contained organizational charts showing the collective structure across multiple states. Regional commanders reported to area supervisors who answered directly to Kruger. Each level provided insulation for the others, making it nearly impossible to trace responsibility for specific crimes. The financial records revealed that the collective operated with an annual budget in the tens of millions, generated through their various criminal enterprises and supported by legitimate businesses that served as fronts. They owned construction companies, security firms, and even medical facilities that provided infrastructure for their operations. "The medical facilities are particularly important," Sarah explained. "They provide the expertise needed for their organ harvesting operations and the facilities to dispose of evidence through cremation services." Elena photographed every document, while Marcus memorized key details from the organizational charts. They were building a comprehensive case file, but the question remained, who could they trust with evidence this explosive when the corruption reached so high into official channels? Sarah's radio crackled with an incoming transmission on a frequency she monitored for friendly contacts. A man's voice, speaking in careful coded language, announced his approach to their location. Within minutes, two figures emerged from the cave passages, moving with the careful precision of people who had spent years operating in hostile territory. "Marcus, Elena, meet Robert Chen and Maria Santos," Sarah said as the newcomers entered the shelter. "They're the reason I've survived this long." Robert Chen, in his late 50s, carried himself with the bearing of a former law enforcement officer. His introduction confirmed Sarah's assessment. He had been an FBI special agent until his investigation into missing persons cases in the Pacific Northwest got too close to the collective's operations. Rather than backing down when his superiors ordered him to drop the cases, he had continued investigating on his own. "They transferred me to white-collar crime in Minneapolis," Robert explained. "When I refused to let the cases go, they forced my early retirement and made sure I'd never work in law enforcement again. That's when I realized the corruption went higher than I'd imagined." Maria Santos presented a different type of survivor. Now in her early 40s, she had escaped from the collective as a teenager and spent the subsequent decades building a new identity while secretly gathering intelligence on her former captors. Her intimate knowledge of their operations and methodology made her invaluable to Sarah's long-term investigation. "I was held in 3 different facilities over 18 months, Maria said quietly. "I learned their routines, their security procedures, and most importantly, I memorized faces and names. When I escaped, I made a promise to myself that I would help bring them down." Robert showed them a collection of military dog tags that had belonged to his former partner, Special Agent Jake Morrison, who had been working undercover to infiltrate the collective's security apparatus. Jake had been discovered and eliminated, but not before he managed to pass crucial intelligence to Robert through dead drops. Jake identified at least 12 active collective facilities across Washington, Oregon, and Northern California, Robert explained. But more importantly, he discovered that they were planning a major expansion of their operations into international trafficking. The dog tags represented more than just personal loss for Robert. They contained encrypted information that Jake had etched into the metal using a technique taught in military intelligence training. Sarah had helped Robert decode the messages, revealing details about the collective's command structure and operational procedures. Maria's contribution to their intelligence network was equally valuable. She had maintained contact with other survivors who had chosen to remain hidden rather than risk exposure by going to authorities. This underground network of survivors provided ongoing intelligence about the collective's activities and helped identify new facilities as they were established. "There are at least 20 of us," Maria said. "We've learned to recognize the signs when they're setting up new operations. Construction projects in remote areas, unusual equipment purchases, changes in local law enforcement personnel. We've been building a comprehensive database of their activities." Robert had used his FBI training to create a professional intelligence operation focused on building a case that would be impossible to suppress or discredit. His files contained detailed financial analyses of the collective's money laundering operations, organizational charts based on intercepted communications, and most importantly, a network of contacts within various agencies who could be trusted when the time came to act. "The key is building such an overwhelming case that they can't simply eliminate all the evidence and witnesses," Robert explained. "We need multiple independent sources, corroborating evidence, and most importantly, we need to present it all simultaneously to prevent them from containing the exposure." Sarah showed them the most crucial piece of intelligence they had gathered, a detailed timeline of planned operations over the next 6 months. Jake's final intelligence drop had included information about the collective's intention to relocate their primary operations to international waters, using a network of cargo ships and offshore platforms to continue their activities beyond the reach of any single nation's law enforcement. "That's why your discovery is so critical," Maria said to Marcus and Elena. "It's forced them to accelerate their timeline. They're moving assets and eliminating evidence faster than planned, which means they're making mistakes." The group had been planning to execute their exposure operation in coordinated strikes against multiple facilities simultaneously. But the twins' discovery had changed the operational landscape, creating both opportunities and increased dangers. Atlas had been trained not just by Sarah, but by the entire network of survivors and investigators. His specialized skills in locating buried evidence and detecting surveillance had made him invaluable for mapping the collective's infrastructure without alerting their security apparatus. "The question now," Robert said, "is whether we accelerate our timeline to take advantage of their current confusion, or whether we help you escape and continue building our case for future action." Marcus and Elena made the decision that would define the rest of their lives. Rather than seeking escape, they chose to help accelerate the exposure operation. Their fresh perspective and technical skills could provide advantages that the long-term investigators had been unable to achieve alone. "We have capabilities you don't," Elena explained to the group. "My forensic geology training and Marcus's technical background give us tools for evidence collection that can stand up in court. But more importantly, we're not known to their surveillance network yet." Robert immediately recognized the strategic value of their offer. "You're right. After years of operating in the shadows, we've become predictable. Fresh faces with legitimate credentials could access areas and information sources that are closed to us." The group spent the next several hours creating a comprehensive digital archive of all evidence collected over the decades. Elena used her camera, and Marcus employed his laptop to create high-resolution scans and photographs of every document, map, and piece of physical evidence in Sarah's collection. Robert contributed a sophisticated digital storage device that he had acquired through his former FBI contacts, a military-grade encrypted drive capable of storing terabytes of information with multiple redundant backup systems. The device was designed to survive extreme conditions and would automatically upload its contents to secure servers if certain trigger conditions were met. "This drive contains 40 years of evidence," Robert explained as they loaded the final files. "Victim testimonies, financial records, surveillance footage, communications intercepts, and forensic evidence from dozens of crime scenes. It's enough to bring down the entire network. Sarah added her personal testimony to the digital archive, recording detailed accounts of her captivity, escape, and decades of investigation. Her statement provided crucial eyewitness testimony that connected historical crimes to current operations, establishing the continuity that would be essential for prosecution. Maria contributed the most emotionally difficult piece of evidence: video testimonies from other survivors who had remained hidden for decades. These individuals had finally agreed to go on record, knowing that their exposure meant giving up the safety of anonymity but potentially saving countless future victims. The testimonies painted a horrifying picture of systematic abuse, but they also demonstrated the remarkable resilience of survivors who had rebuilt their lives while never forgetting their commitment to justice. Each person had contributed unique pieces of information that helped complete the puzzle of the collective's operations. Atlas played a crucial role in the evidence compilation process. Robert had trained him to locate and retrieve specific types of evidence, and the dog had been instrumental in discovering burial sites and hidden caches throughout the region. His specialized training included the ability to detect human remains, even after decades of decomposition. Atlas has found 43 burial sites in the past 8 years, Sarah said, as she documented the dog's contributions to their investigation. Each site has been carefully mapped and photographed, with GPS coordinates that will allow authorities to recover every victim. Elena's expertise proved invaluable in analyzing soil samples and geological evidence from the various crime scenes. Her forensic geology training allowed her to establish timelines for when sites had been disturbed and to identify unique mineral signatures that could link different locations to common sources of tools or materials. Marcus contributed his technical skills to enhance the digital archive with metadata, cross-references, and search capabilities that would allow investigators to quickly locate specific pieces of evidence within the massive collection. His system would make it possible for multiple law enforcement agencies to work with the evidence simultaneously. The group also compiled intelligence on the collective's current operational status, using the communications they had intercepted to track the movement of personnel and resources in response to the twins' discovery. The criminal organization was clearly in crisis mode, accelerating timelines and making decisions that created new vulnerabilities. They're evacuating their primary facilities and destroying evidence, Robert observed, monitoring radio traffic. But they're also exposing themselves by moving so much personnel and equipment simultaneously. This is our opportunity. Sarah had maintained contact with trusted individuals in various agencies, people like Robert who had tried to investigate the collective through official channels and been blocked by corruption. These contacts were positioned to act on solid evidence if it could be presented in a way that couldn't be suppressed. We have allies in the U.S. Attorney's Office, the state police, and even some federal agencies, Sarah explained. The key is delivering evidence to all of them simultaneously, along with major media outlets, so that no single point of failure can stop the exposure. The digital storage device became their insurance policy and their weapon. It contained enough evidence to destroy the collective, but only if it could be delivered to the right people at the right time. The plan they developed was audacious and dangerous. Rather than simply exposing the collective from a distance, they would infiltrate the main operational compound to gather final evidence and, if possible, rescue any current victims before the organization completed its evacuation procedures. Sarah had been studying the primary facility for over a decade, using Atlas and her network of allies to map every aspect of its security, layout, and operational procedures. The compound was located on a privately owned tract of land 50 miles deeper into the wilderness, accessible only by a single heavily monitored road. The facility has underground sections that connect to natural cave systems, Sarah explained. pointing to detailed architectural drawings she had compiled over years of observation. During my captivity, I memorized the layout, and subsequent intelligence has confirmed that the basic structure hasn't changed significantly. Robert contributed crucial intelligence about the compound's security systems, information that Jake Morrison had gathered during his undercover infiltration before his death. The security was military-grade, with multiple redundant systems designed to detect and eliminate intruders before they could reach the sensitive areas. Maria's knowledge proved essential for understanding the facility's operational rhythms. She had been held there for several months and remembered details about shift changes, guard rotations, and the daily routines that might provide windows of opportunity for infiltration. The compound operates with minimal staffing during early morning hours, Maria recalled. They rely heavily on electronic surveillance during that period. But there are blind spots in the coverage that I remember from my escape attempts. Elena studied the geological surveys of the area and identified natural approaches that would avoid the primary security perimeter. Her analysis revealed underground watercourses and rock formations that could provide concealed access routes to the facility's more vulnerable sections. Marcus examined the technical specifications for the compound's communication and power systems, identifying potential points of failure that could create confusion during their infiltration. His engineering background helped him understand how to disable specific systems without triggering full security alerts. The most crucial piece of intelligence was a set of security blueprints that Robert had obtained through his remaining contacts in federal law enforcement. The blueprints revealed not just the facility's defensive measures, but also the locations of critical infrastructure and, most importantly, the areas where victims were likely to be held. Atlas would play a central role in the infiltration. His training in detecting human presence and navigating complex terrain made him invaluable for reconnaissance and for locating victims within the facility. Sarah had trained him specifically for this type of operation, knowing that the day might come when they would need to attempt a rescue. The blueprints show holding areas in the underground sections, Robert pointed out, indicating specific locations on the detailed drawings. If there are current victims, they'll be in these chambers. Atlas can locate them faster and more quietly than any human searcher. The group's intelligence indicated that the collective was accelerating their evacuation timeline in response to the twins' discovery. This created both opportunities and increased dangers. Fewer personnel would be present at the facility, but those remaining would be on high alert and prepared for potential threats. Sarah had identified a maintenance access point that connected to the natural cave system she knew from her escape decades earlier. The route would require technical climbing skills that Marcus and Elena possessed, but would allow them to bypass the primary security perimeter entirely. The maintenance tunnels provide access to the power and communication systems, Sarah explained. If we can disable their surveillance capabilities, we can move through the facility with much less risk of detection. Maria contributed the most dangerous piece of intelligence, information about the collective's protocols for eliminating evidence and witnesses when facilities were compromised. The organization had contingency plans that included destroying entire facilities with explosives if necessary to prevent exposure. They won't hesitate to kill everyone, including their own people, if they think the facility has been compromised, Maria warned. We'll have a very limited window to gather evidence and evacuate any victims before they implement their scorched earth protocols. The security blueprints revealed the locations of the facility's self-destruct systems, explosive charges strategically placed throughout the underground sections that could bring down the entire complex. The charges were controlled from a central command center that would be heavily defended and monitored. Elena realized that her geological expertise might be crucial for understanding the facility's structural vulnerabilities. If they could identify load-bearing elements and critical support systems, they might be able to create controlled collapses that would trap the collective's personnel while allowing victims and evidence to be evacuated. "We're not just planning an infiltration," Marcus said, "studying the complete intelligence package. We're planning a rescue operation that has to succeed before they can implement their destruction protocols." The infiltration began at 3:01 a.m., when facility security was at its lowest staffing level and electronic surveillance systems provided the primary protection. Marcus and Elena approached through the natural cave system that Sarah had mapped, their climbing skills allowing them to navigate passages that would be impossible for most infiltrators. Atlas moved ahead of them, his specialized training enabling him to detect security sensors and human presence long before they became visible threats. The dog's ability to navigate in complete darkness gave the team a significant advantage over the compound's defensive systems. Elena's geological analysis had been accurate. The underground watercourses provided perfect concealment for their approach, and the natural acoustics of the cave system would mask any sounds from their movement. They reached the maintenance access point exactly as planned, finding the entrance concealed but unguarded. Marcus used his technical knowledge to disable the alarm systems protecting the maintenance tunnels, carefully bypassing electronic sensors without triggering backup alerts. His engineering background proved invaluable as he identified which systems could be safely interrupted and which would immediately notify security personnel. Once inside the facility's underground sections, they discovered that the collective's operation was far more extensive than even their intelligence had suggested. The complex stretched through multiple levels of underground chambers, with sophisticated ventilation, power, and communication systems that rivaled military installations. Elena immediately began documenting everything with her camera, capturing evidence of the facility's construction and operational capabilities. The level of investment represented by the underground complex suggested resources far beyond typical criminal enterprises. Confirming their suspicions about high-level backing, Atlas led them through corridors that showed signs of recent evacuation activities. Equipment had been hastily removed, computer systems had been stripped of their hard drives, and document storage areas had been cleared of their contents. The collective was systematically eliminating evidence as they prepared to abandon the facility. In the administrative section, Marcus discovered a computer terminal that hadn't been completely wiped. Using his technical skills, he managed to recover fragments of deleted files, including what appeared to be a prisoner registry with current information about individuals being held at the facility. The registry was the most damning evidence they had found yet, a systematic catalogue of current victims with detailed personal information, capture dates and notations about their intended fate. The document confirmed that the collective was actively holding prisoners at the facility, making rescue operations an immediate priority. Elena photographed every page of the recovered registry, knowing that this evidence alone could support dozens of kidnapping prosecutions. The systematic nature of the record-keeping demonstrated the criminal organization's business-like approach to human trafficking and murder. Atlas's behavior became increasingly agitated as they moved deeper into the facility, his trained senses detecting human presence in areas where the registry indicated prisoners were being held. His specialized training in locating human remains and detecting distress made him an invaluable guide through the complex underground maze. They discovered the holding areas in the facility's deepest level, where reinforced doors and sophisticated security systems protected what amounted to a private prison. The cells were occupied by 7 individuals in various stages of physical and psychological trauma. Confirming the registry's accuracy, Elena immediately began documenting the conditions while Marcus worked on the electronic locks that secured the cells. His technical knowledge allowed him to bypass the security systems without triggering alarms. But the process required careful attention to avoid alerting facility security to their presence. The rescued individuals were in poor condition but able to move, and their testimonies confirmed the worst aspects of the collective's operations. They had been held for periods ranging from several weeks to over a year, and their accounts provided real-time intelligence about the organization's current activities. Atlas positioned himself as a guard while the rescue operation proceeded. His training allowing him to detect approaching security personnel long before they became a threat. His protective instincts had fully engaged, and he was prepared to defend the group against any opposition. Marcus discovered that the facility's communication systems were still partially operational, allowing him to intercept ongoing transmissions between the collective's leadership and field operatives. The intercepted communications revealed that the organization suspected infiltration and was accelerating their evacuation. Timeline. Elena found additional evidence in the form of medical records documenting experimental procedures that had been performed on prisoners. The records revealed that the collective's operations included medical experimentation and organ harvesting, adding additional charges to the growing list of crimes they had documented. The prisoner registry they had recovered contained references to other facilities and transfer schedules, providing intelligence about the broader scope of the collective's operations. This information would be crucial for law enforcement agencies attempting to locate and rescue additional victims at other sites. As they prepared to evacuate the rescued prisoners, footsteps echoed through the underground corridors, accompanied by voices speaking in urgent, clipped tones. Marcus quickly shut down the computer terminal while Elena gathered the most critical evidence. But they realized that escape through their planned route would be impossible. With 7 weakened individuals, Atlas's protective instincts flared as he positioned himself between the group and the approaching sounds. His training had prepared him for exactly this situation, and his low growling indicated that he detected multiple armed individuals moving through the facility with tactical precision. The voice that emerged from the shadows belonged to David Kruger himself, the man whose face they had seen in decades of Polaroid photographs. Now in his 70s, but still carrying himself with military bearing, he appeared with 3 armed associates who moved with the disciplined coordination of former Special Forces operatives. "Dr. Rodriguez and Ms. Rodriguez," Kruger said, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to controlling life-and-death situations. "Your academic credentials are impressive, but your timing is unfortunate." Elena stepped protectively in front of the rescued prisoners, while Marcus positioned himself to shield the evidence they had gathered. Both twins realized that their survival now depended on buying time for Sarah and Robert, who were monitoring communications from their external position. "You're David Kruger," Elena said, her voice steady despite the terror she felt. "We know about your organization, your victims, and your corruption network. This ends today." Kruger smiled with the cold confidence of someone who had survived 5 decades of criminal operations by eliminating threats efficiently and completely. "You've certainly been thorough in your investigation. I'm actually impressed by the quality of intelligence your group has assembled." Behind Kruger, Marcus could see sophisticated computer equipment that hadn't been evacuated with the rest of the facility's operational technology. The setup appeared to be a command center with multiple communication systems, surveillance monitors, and what looked like remote detonation controls for the facility's destruction charges. "The computer database you're looking at contains our complete operational history," Kruger said, noticing Marcus's attention. 47 years of successful operations, detailed records of over 3,000 successful acquisitions, and comprehensive files on every individual who has ever posed a threat to our organization. Elena realized that the command center computer represented the ultimate evidence, a complete database that would provide irrefutable proof of the collective's crimes and Identify every victim, every participant, and every official who had provided protection or support over nearly 5 decades. Atlas suddenly lunged forward, his attack creating the distraction that Marcus needed to reach the computer terminal. The dog's specialized combat training proved itself as he engaged Kruger's security team, allowing the twins crucial seconds to access the database. Marcus's technical skills proved invaluable as he rapidly navigated through the computer system, identifying the most critical files and beginning an emergency download to their encrypted storage device. The database was massive, containing detailed records that would support thousands of criminal prosecutions. Kruger produced a remote detonation device, threatening to destroy the entire facility unless Marcus stopped the download immediately. This complex contains enough explosives to create a crater 50 feet deep. You'll all die, but more importantly, all evidence of our operations will be eliminated. Elena realized that Kruger's threat was real, but she also understood that allowing the collective to destroy this evidence would condemn countless future victims. She made a desperate decision, using her geological knowledge to identify structural weaknesses in the command center that might allow them to escape while preserving the critical computer. Equipment, the database download, was nearly complete when Atlas's attack succeeded in disarming one of Kruger's associates. The dog's training had prepared him for exactly this type of combat situation, and his protective instincts drove him to continue fighting. Despite being significantly outnumbered, Marcus realized that the computer system had multiple backup protocols that would automatically upload critical data to remote servers if the facility's destruction charges were activated. Kruger's threat to destroy the complex would actually preserve the evidence they needed. Even if it killed everyone present, Elena used her understanding of the facility's geological foundation to identify escape routes that would protect them from the planned explosions. The natural cave systems that had provided their entry route could also serve as bomb shelters if they could reach them before the detonation. Kruger's desperation became apparent as he realized that his organization's survival depended on eliminating not just the current witnesses, but also the network of investigators who had been building this case for decades. The command center database contained information that would identify and locate every member of Sarah's resistance network. Elena grabbed one of the rescued prisoners and began moving toward the cave system access point, knowing they had only minutes before Kruger would activate the destruction sequence. Marcus continued the database download while Atlas maintained his fierce protection of the group, his combat training proving invaluable against trained operatives. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the facility as Kruger began activating charges in the outer sections, starting the systematic destruction that would eventually reach the command center. Marcus's download was at 90% completion, but each second increased the risk that they would all be buried alive. Sarah's voice crackled through their radio communication system. "Federal teams are approaching your location. We've activated Robert's emergency contacts, and multiple agencies are converging on the facility. Hold your position if possible." Elena realized that rescue was coming, but they needed to survive the next few minutes while Kruger completed his destruction sequence. She used her geological knowledge to identify the strongest structural points in the command center, areas that might survive the planned explosions long enough for rescue teams to reach them. Marcus's download completed just as Kruger activated additional explosive charges, causing severe structural damage to the facility's support systems. The computer equipment began failing due to power fluctuations, but the encrypted storage device had successfully captured the complete database. Atlas broke free from his engagement with Kruger's security team and immediately moved to protect the weakest of the rescued prisoners, his training prioritizing the safety of victims over his own survival. The dog's dedication to his mission remained absolute. Even in the face of imminent death, Elena found its emergency beacon. Among the command center equipment, a military-grade device designed to alert federal task forces to the exact location of the facility. The beacon had been Kruger's backup plan for summoning extraction support, but Elena activated it to guide rescue teams to their precise location underground. The beacon immediately began transmitting their coordinates to multiple federal agencies, along with automated distress signals that would ensure priority response from search and rescue teams. Elena realized that this device represented their best chance of survival and rescue. Kruger made a final desperate attempt to eliminate all witnesses by manually activating the remaining explosive charges, but Marcus tackled him before he could complete the detonation sequence. The two men struggled for control of the remote device while explosions continued to rock the facility around them. Elena coordinated the movement of rescued prisoners toward the most structurally sound area of the command center, using her geological expertise to identify spaces that would provide maximum protection from the ongoing explosions. Her training in disaster geology proved invaluable for predicting how the facility would collapse. Atlas positioned himself as a living shield between the prisoners and the continuing violence, his protective instincts overriding any concern for his own safety. The dog's specialized training had prepared him for exactly this type of crisis situation, and he remained focused on his mission to protect innocent lives. The database they had downloaded contained more than just victim records. It included detailed information about every official who had provided protection to the collective, every business that had served as a front operation, and every financial transaction that had supported their criminal enterprise over 5 decades. Marcus succeeded in preventing Kruger from completing the final detonation sequence, but the partial explosions had severely damaged the facility's structural integrity. Water began flooding into the lower levels as underground streams were redirected by the blast damage, creating new dangers for everyone trapped in the complex. Elena heard the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approaching the facility, indicating that federal response teams were beginning aerial reconnaissance of the site. The emergency beacon was successfully guiding rescue operations to their location, but extraction would still require precise coordination. Sarah's radio communication provided updates on the external situation. Multiple federal agencies have surrounded the facility. ATF bomb disposal teams are preparing to enter the complex. Medical teams are standing by for victim evacuation. Kruger made one final attempt to destroy the evidence by targeting the encrypted storage device directly, but Atlas intervened with a protective attack that prevented the destruction of their crucial evidence. The dog's final act of service ensured that decades of criminal activity would finally be exposed to justice. The emergency beacon continued transmitting not just location data, but also automated messages about the number of victims requiring medical attention and the presence of armed hostiles within the facility. This information would be crucial for rescue teams planning their approach to the dangerous underground complex. Elena realized that the flooding was actually helping to stabilize some sections of the facility by cooling the remaining explosive charges and preventing their detonation. Her geological training allowed her to predict which areas would remain safe as rescue teams worked to reach them. Federal agents breached the facility through multiple entry points simultaneously, their tactical teams coordinating with bomb disposal specialists to navigate the partially destroyed underground complex. The emergency beacon had provided precise coordinates, allowing rescue teams to locate the command center despite the structural damage from Kruger's explosions. Elena heard voices calling through the debris, professional rescue workers who were systematically clearing passages to reach trapped individuals. She responded with information about their location, the number of rescued prisoners requiring medical attention, and the presence of armed hostiles who might still pose threats. the first responders. To reach their location were ATF agents with specialized equipment for dealing with explosive devices and structural collapses. Their arrival allowed Marcus to finally release his grip on the detonation device, while federal agents secured Kruger and his remaining associates. Atlas, despite injuries from his protective actions, immediately began working with the rescue teams to locate any additional victims who might be trapped in other sections of the facility. His specialized training in search and rescue operations made him invaluable for the complex extraction process. Elena discovered that federal teams had been monitoring the collective for months through a parallel investigation that Robert's contacts had initiated. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, whose identification tag they had found at the original tunnel site, had been working undercover for years to build a federal case against the organization. Agent Walsh has been missing for 6 months, explained FBI Special Agent Maria Santos. Elena, learning that their survivor ally shared a name with the federal agent. Her undercover investigation provided the intelligence that led us to tonight's operation. The federal case files revealed that multiple agencies had been building overlapping investigations into the collective, but coordination had been prevented by the organization's infiltration of various law enforcement hierarchies. The evidence Marcus and Elena had gathered provided the missing connections between separate investigative efforts. Agent Walsh's undercover work had produced detailed intelligence about the collective's financial operations, including bank accounts, money laundering schemes, and the network of legitimate businesses that served as fronts for criminal activities. Her investigation had identified over $200 million in assets that could be seized. Elena realized that the federal investigation had been proceeding along similar lines to Sarah's decades-long effort, but with access to resources and legal authorities that the civilian investigators lacked. The combination of both approaches would create an unprecedented case against organized criminal conspiracy. Marcus was debriefed by federal computer specialists who were amazed by the completeness of the database he had downloaded. The collective's meticulous record-keeping had created evidence that would support prosecutions across multiple jurisdictions and potentially decades of appeals processes. The rescued prisoners were evacuated to medical facilities where federal victim specialists began the process of documenting their experiences and gathering testimony that would be crucial for prosecution efforts. Each individual's account provided unique perspectives on the collective's operations and methods. Atlas was treated by veterinary specialists who recognized his exceptional training and service. Federal agents were particularly interested in his ability to locate buried evidence and his specialized combat training, capabilities that would be valuable for ongoing investigations into other collective facilities. Elena learned that the federal investigation had identified at least 47 facilities operated by the collective across multiple states, with coordinated raids being conducted simultaneously to prevent evidence destruction and witness elimination. Their discovery had triggered the largest organized crime operation in federal law enforcement history. The command center database revealed connections between the collective and international criminal organizations, suggesting that the investigation would expand to include foreign law enforcement agencies and international tribunals. The scope of criminal activity far exceeded what even Sarah's comprehensive investigation had uncovered. Agent Walsh's federal case files contained evidence of corruption reaching into the highest levels of government, including federal judges, congressional representatives, and executive branch officials who had provided protection for the collective's operations in exchange for financial and political support. Marcus discovered that the federal investigation had been using advanced surveillance technologies to monitor the collective's communications and financial transactions, gathering evidence that complemented the physical and documentary evidence collected by Sarah's network of civilian investigators. Elena was interviewed by federal prosecutors who were already preparing criminal indictments based on the evidence gathered during the raid. The systematic nature of the documentation would allow for prosecution under federal racketeering statutes, potentially resulting in life sentences for organizational leaders. The federal case files revealed that Agent Walsh had successfully identified and documented the collective's international expansion plans, including the network of cargo ships and offshore platforms that were intended to move their operations beyond the reach of domestic law enforcement. Atlas's specialized training records, maintained by federal agencies, showed that he had been part of a classified program to develop canines capable of detecting evidence of organized criminal activity. His assignment to investigate the collective had been part of a long-term federal strategy to build an unassailable case against the organization. 6 months after the raid, Marcus and Elena found themselves in federal courtrooms across multiple states, providing testimony that would help convict over 200 members of the collective's criminal organization. The trials had become the most significant organized crime prosecutions in modern American history. Elena's forensic geology expertise proved crucial in establishing timelines for burial sites and connecting physical evidence to specific crimes. Her analysis of soil samples and geological formations provided irrefutable proof that linked the collective's activities across decades and multiple jurisdictions. Marcus testified about the technical aspects of the database they had recovered, explaining how the organization's systematic record-keeping had created a complete audit trail of their criminal activities. Federal prosecutors used his analysis to demonstrate the premeditated and organized nature of crimes spanning nearly 50 years. David Kruger's trial received national media attention as prosecutors presented evidence of his leadership role in thousands of murders, kidnappings, and trafficking operations. The victim testimonies provided powerful first-hand accounts that demolished any possibility of denial or minimization of the organization's crimes. Sarah Winters was finally recognized publicly for her decades of investigation and survival, receiving commendations from multiple law enforcement agencies and victim advocacy organizations. Her comprehensive documentation had provided the foundation that made the successful prosecutions possible. Robert Chen returned to federal law enforcement as a special consultant on organized crime investigations, his expertise in the collective's operations making him invaluable for tracking down remaining associates and identifying additional evidence sites. His vindication after years of professional exile provided a powerful example of persistence in seeking justice. Maria Santos established a victim support network that provided counseling, legal advocacy, and practical assistance to survivors of the collective's crimes. Her own experience as a survivor gave her unique credibility and insight into the long-term recovery process that other victims would face. Atlas received official recognition as a federal law enforcement service animal, with his specialized training becoming the basis for new programs designed to combat organized crime and human trafficking. His exceptional service during the investigation and rescue operations made him a symbol of persistence in seeking justice. The trials revealed the full scope of corruption that had protected the collective for decades, leading to additional prosecutions of judges, prosecutors, law enforcement officials, and politicians who had received payments or other benefits in exchange for protecting the criminal organization. Elena discovered that her academic research on forensic geology had been referenced in federal training programs, with her techniques for analyzing crime scenes and establishing timelines being adopted by law enforcement agencies nationwide. Her expertise had evolved from academic study to practical application in serving justice. Marcus found himself consulted by technology companies and law enforcement agencies interested in developing better systems for preserving and analyzing digital evidence in organized crime investigations. His experience with the collective's database had demonstrated the importance of comprehensive digital forensics. The most powerful evidence in the trials came from victim testimonies that had been recorded and preserved by federal investigators. These statements provided personal accounts that transformed statistical evidence into human stories that resonated with juries and judges across multiple prosecutions. Sarah's journal, which had documented decades of investigation, was entered into evidence in multiple trials and became a crucial resource for prosecutors seeking to establish patterns of criminal behavior over extended periods. Her meticulous record-keeping provided corroboration for testimony and physical evidence. The federal investigation had recovered over $400 million in assets from the collective's various front businesses and money laundering operations. These funds were being distributed to victim compensation programs and used to support law enforcement efforts to combat similar organizations. Elena and Marcus established a scholarship program for students interested in using scientific training to support criminal justice efforts, recognizing that their academic backgrounds had been crucial to their ability to gather and analyze evidence effectively during their investigation. Atlas's story inspired federal agencies to expand their use of specially trained animals in investigating complex criminal organizations, leading to the development of new training programs for dogs capable of detecting evidence of human trafficking and organized crime activities. The trials resulted in life sentences for organizational leaders and significant prison terms for hundreds of associates and corrupted officials. The systematic dismantling of the collective's network demonstrated that even the most sophisticated criminal organizations could be defeated through persistent investigation and coordinated law enforcement efforts. Roberts' contacts within federal agencies had been vindicated, with several officials receiving commendations for their role in maintaining the parallel investigation despite pressure from corrupted colleagues. Their persistence had been crucial to the successful conclusion of the case. Elena was invited to speak at law enforcement conferences about the intersection of academic research and criminal investigation, sharing insights about how specialized knowledge could contribute to solving complex cases that traditional investigative methods might miss. 1 year after the trials concluded, Marcus and Elena returned to Olympic National Park for the dedication of a memorial honoring the collective's victims. The site had been transformed from a place of horror into a location where families could find closure and remember loved ones who had been lost to decades of systematic violence. The memorial ceremony brought together hundreds of family members who had spent years wondering about the fate of missing relatives. For many, the trials had provided the first concrete answers about what had happened to their loved ones, ending decades of uncertainty and unanswered questions. Elena stood before the assembled crowd, her role as one of the discoverers giving her words special significance as she spoke about the importance of never giving up hope for justice. Her speech emphasized how chance encounters and individual courage could expose even the most sophisticated criminal conspiracies. Marcus addressed the gathering about the role that ordinary citizens could play in supporting law enforcement efforts, explaining how their academic training had been essential, but noting that citizen awareness and reporting remained crucial for preventing similar organizations from operating undetected. Sarah Winters was the keynote speaker, her survival story and decades-long investigation providing inspiration for family members who had maintained hope despite years of official indifference. Her message emphasized that justice, while sometimes delayed, could ultimately prevail through persistent effort and unwavering determination. Atlas participated in the ceremony as a representative of all the law enforcement officers and service animals who had contributed to the investigation. His presence provided a tangible connection between the ceremonial aspects of the memorial and the practical work that had been necessary to achieve justice. The memorial included a bronze plaque that listed the names of over 3,000 confirmed victims, each name representing a life that had been lost to the collective's criminal enterprise. The comprehensive nature of the list demonstrated the extraordinary scope of violence that had been perpetrated over nearly 5 decades. Elena discovered that the memorial plaque had been created using bronze recovered from the collective's various facilities, materials that had been melted down and reformed into something that honored victims rather than enabling their exploitation. The symbolic transformation reflected the broader victory of justice over criminal enterprise. Robert Chen announced the establishment of a new federal task force dedicated to investigating organized criminal networks that operate across jurisdictional boundaries, with funding and personnel specifically allocated to prevent other organizations from achieving the longevity and sophistication that had characterized the collective. Maria Santos revealed that her victim support network had expanded to serve survivors of organized crime throughout the Pacific Northwest, providing services that addressed both immediate needs and long-term recovery challenges. Her program had become a model for similar efforts in other regions. The memorial ceremony included the presentation of awards to law enforcement officers, federal agents, and civilian investigators who had contributed to the successful investigation and prosecution of the collective. These recognitions acknowledged both professional excellence and personal courage in confronting a dangerous criminal organization. Elena learned that several universities had established research programs focused on applying academic expertise to criminal justice challenges, using the investigation of the collective as a case study for how scholarly training could contribute to solving complex law enforcement problems. Marcus was invited to join a federal advisory committee on digital evidence preservation and analysis, his experience with the collective's database having demonstrated the importance of comprehensive technological approaches to investigating organized crime in the digital age. The memorial site included educational displays that explained how criminal organizations like the collective were able to operate for decades without detection, helping visitors understand the warning signs and reporting mechanisms that could prevent similar tragedies in the future. Atlas received a special commendation for his service during the investigation, with federal agencies announcing that his training methods would be incorporated into expanded programs for law enforcement animals, specializing in complex criminal investigations and victim recovery operations. Sarah's comprehensive documentation of the collective's activities had been donated to federal law enforcement archives, where it would serve as a permanent resource for investigators studying organized crime patterns and developing new approaches to dismantling similar networks. The ceremony concluded with the reading of letters from family members who had found closure through the investigation and trials, their words providing powerful testimony to the importance of never abandoning efforts to seek justice for victims of violent crime. Elena realized that the memorial plaque represented more than just recognition of past victims. It served as a permanent reminder of the responsibility that all citizens shared for protecting vulnerable members of society and supporting efforts to prevent criminal exploitation. Marcus understood that their chance discovery in the forest had become part of a larger story about the power of individual action to create systemic change, demonstrating that ordinary people could make extraordinary contributions to justice when they chose to act courageously in the face of danger. 2 years after the memorial dedication, Elena found herself on a movie set in Vancouver, serving as a technical consultant for a documentary film that would tell the complete story of the collective investigation. The production had attracted Academy Award-winning filmmakers who recognized the extraordinary nature of the case and its implications for understanding organized crime in America. Marcus worked closely with the film's research team, helping them understand the technical aspects of digital forensics and evidence analysis that had been crucial to building the prosecution case. His expertise ensured that the documentary would accurately portray the methodical work required to dismantle sophisticated criminal organizations. Sarah Winters had initially been reluctant to participate in the film project, but eventually agreed when she realized that her story could inspire other survivors and demonstrate the importance of never giving up hope for justice. Her interviews provided the emotional core of the documentary, showing how individual determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds. The documentary film had already generated significant interest from international audiences, with distribution agreements in place for over 30 countries. The story resonated globally because organized crime networks, similar to the Collective, operated in many regions, making the investigation's methods and lessons relevant to law enforcement agencies worldwide. Elena discovered that the filmmakers had obtained unprecedented access to federal evidence files, allowing them to include actual photographs, documents, and recordings that had been used in the trials. This authentic material would give viewers a comprehensive understanding of the investigation's scope and complexity. Marcus learned that several law enforcement agencies were planning to use the documentary as a training resource, recognizing that the film could help officers understand how academic expertise and citizen involvement could enhance traditional investigative methods. The production team had interviewed over 200 individuals connected to the case, including survivors, family members, investigators, prosecutors, and even some convicted members of the Collective who agreed to participate in exchange for reduced sentences. This comprehensive approach ensured that multiple perspectives would be represented. Atlas appeared throughout the documentary as a symbol of dedication and service, his story demonstrating how specially trained animals could contribute to complex investigations. Federal agencies had already received increased funding for canine programs, based partly on public interest generated by his role in the case. Sarah's participation in the film had required her to revisit traumatic memories, but she found the process therapeutic and empowering. Her interviews revealed details about survival and resistance that had not been public during the trials, providing inspiration for other victims of organized crime. The documentary included extensive coverage of the corruption that had protected the Collective, with interviews from former officials who had been convicted and agreed to explain how criminal organizations infiltrate governmental institutions. These segments would serve as warnings about the vulnerability of democratic systems to organized criminal influence. Elena was surprised to learn that the film had attracted attention from academic institutions, with several universities planning to use it as course material for programs in criminology, forensic science, and public administration. The case study provided real-world examples of concepts that were often taught only in theoretical contexts. Marcus found that his involvement in the documentary had led to consulting opportunities with technology companies developing new tools for digital evidence analysis. His experience with the Collective's database had demonstrated the need for better systems to handle large-scale criminal investigations. The filmmakers had gained access to previously classified federal surveillance footage that showed the Collective's operations from the perspective of law enforcement agencies. This material provided viewers with unprecedented insight into how organized crime networks operated and how they were ultimately dismantled. Sarah's story had inspired the creation of a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting long-term survivors of organized crime, with funding from the documentary's producers and distribution companies. The organization would provide resources that addressed the unique challenges faced by individuals who had spent decades seeking justice. Elena learned that the documentary would premiere simultaneously at film festivals, law enforcement conferences, and victim advocacy events, ensuring that its message reached audiences who could benefit from understanding both the investigation's methods and its broader implications for society. The film included extensive analysis of how the collective had been able to operate for decades without detection, providing valuable insights for preventing similar organizations from achieving comparable longevity and sophistication. These analytical segments would be particularly valuable for law enforcement training purposes. Marcus discovered that international law enforcement agencies were already requesting copies of the documentary for their own training programs, recognizing that the investigation's methods could be adapted for use against organized crime networks operating in different cultural and legal contexts. The documentary represented more than just entertainment. It had become an educational tool that would help future investigators understand how persistence, collaboration, and innovative thinking could overcome even the most sophisticated criminal enterprises. 5 years after their chance encounter with Atlas on the forest trail, Marcus and Elena returned to Olympic National Park for the dedication of a new search and rescue training facility. The center would train the next generation of K9 teams using methods developed from Atlas's specialized skills and the lessons learned during the collective investigation. The facility represented a transformation of the site where their adventure had begun, with the original tunnel entrance now serving as part of an educational display that taught visitors about the importance of reporting suspicious activities and supporting law enforcement efforts to combat organized crime. Elena walked through the training center with Atlas, now officially retired, but serving as a mentor for younger dogs, learning evidence detection and victim location techniques. His legacy lived on through the animals he helped train, each one carrying forward the skills that had been so crucial to exposing the collective's crimes. Marcus examined the sophisticated equipment that new K9 teams would use, a technology that had been developed based on lessons learned during their investigation. The training facility represented federal investment in preventing similar criminal organizations from operating undetected in remote wilderness areas. Sarah Winters served as the facility's director, her decades of experience and intimate knowledge of the collective's methods making her uniquely qualified to train investigators who might face similar challenges. Her transformation from survivor to educator demonstrated the power of channeling traumatic experiences into positive action. The training center's library contained comprehensive case files from the collective investigation, providing future investigators with detailed examples of how organized crime networks operated and how they could be successfully dismantled through coordinated law enforcement efforts and citizen involvement. Elena discovered that the facility's curriculum included courses on forensic geology, with her techniques for analyzing crime scenes and establishing timelines now being taught to investigators from agencies across the country. Her academic expertise had evolved into practical training that would benefit countless future cases. Marcus learned that the center's technology training programs were being used by federal agencies to develop new approaches to digital evidence analysis, with his experience handling the collective's database serving as a foundation for understanding how criminal organizations use technology to coordinate their operations. Atlas wore a new search and rescue vest, specially designed to honor his service while providing modern equipment that would enhance the capabilities of working K9 teams. The vest symbolized the continuation of his mission to find missing persons and locate evidence of criminal activity. The dedication ceremony brought together law enforcement officials, victim advocacy groups, and family members who had been affected by the collective's crimes. Their presence demonstrated the lasting impact of the investigation and the ongoing commitment to preventing similar tragedies Elena addressed the gathering about the importance of trusting instincts and taking action when confronting suspicious activities, emphasizing that ordinary citizens could make extraordinary contributions to justice when they chose to act courageously despite personal risk. Marcus spoke about the role of technology in modern criminal investigations, explaining how digital evidence could provide crucial insights into criminal operations while cautioning about the importance of preserving evidence properly to ensure its admissibility in legal proceedings. Sarah's keynote address focused on the long-term nature of seeking justice, acknowledging that some investigations require decades of patient work, but emphasizing that persistence and collaboration could ultimately prevail against even the most sophisticated criminal enterprises. The training facility included a memorial garden where family members could reflect on loved ones lost to organized crime, providing a peaceful space that honored victims while serving the practical purpose of training future investigators who would work to prevent similar tragedies. Atlas participated in a demonstration of evidence detection techniques, his skills still sharp despite his advanced age and retirement status. The demonstration showed visitors how specially trained animals could locate evidence that human investigators might miss, highlighting the importance of canine programs in modern law enforcement. Elena realized that their chance encounter with Atlas had created ripple effects that would continue for generations, with the training facility serving as a permanent legacy that would help protect countless future victims of organized crime through improved investigative techniques and interagency cooperation. Marcus understood that their decision to follow a mysterious German Shepherd into the forest had ultimately saved thousands of lives by exposing and dismantling one of America's most sophisticated criminal organizations, demonstrating how individual choices to act courageously could create systemic changes that benefited society as a whole. The new search and rescue vest that Atlas wore bore a simple inscription: "In service to justice, finding the lost, protecting the innocent." These words captured not only his personal mission but also the broader commitment that all participants in the investigation had made to ensuring that such systematic criminal exploitation could never again operate with impunity. The training facility stood as proof that justice, while sometimes delayed, could ultimately triumph through the combined efforts of dedicated individuals who refused to accept that criminal organizations were too powerful or too sophisticated to be defeated by persistent investigation and unwavering moral courage.